Her husband left her buried in debt. But what his dog revealed inside a locked barn rewrote everything she believed. The wind cut across the Wyoming valley as Evelyn Carter sat alone after the funeral, surrounded by bills she didn't understand. The farm was slipping away, until a silent K9 refused to leave her side and led her to a barn sealed for 30 years. What waited inside wasn't ruin. It was a truth powerful enough to change everything. Comment 1 or 0 and tell me where you're watching from. The wind came down the Wyoming mountains like it always did. Low, steady, and unforgiving. It swept across the open fields, rattling the old fence posts and whispering through the dry winter grass like something alive. The Carter farmhouse stood alone against that wide, empty sky, its wooden frame weathered by decades of storms and silence. Inside, Evelyn Carter sat at the kitchen table. She hadn't moved in a long time. The chair beneath her felt harder than it used to, or maybe it was just that everything felt different now. The house, the air, even the light that filtered through the lace curtains. None of it felt like home anymore. Jack had been gone for 3 days. The funeral had come and gone in a blur of black coats, quiet handshakes, and murmured condolences. People had filled the small church down in town, neighbors, ranchers, a few old friends from Jack's military days who had traveled far to stand at attention beside his casket. They spoke of him in low, respectful tones. A good man. A quiet man. A man who had seen things he never talked about. A man who had come home and built something steady. Evelyn had nodded, thanked them, held herself together. But now the house was empty, and the silence was louder than anything she had ever known. Across the room, near the front door, Titan lay stretched out on the worn wooden floorboards. The German shepherd hadn't moved much either. His gray and black coat rose and fell slowly with each breath. His ears twitched at every sound. The wind, the creak of the house, the distant cry of a hawk somewhere high above the valley. But his eyes remained fixed on the door. Waiting. Evelyn followed his gaze for a moment, then looked away. "He's not coming back, boy," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. Titan didn't react. Or maybe he did, in the smallest way, a tightening of his body, a slight shift of his paws. But he didn't lift his head. Jack had trained him well. Too well. Evelyn turned her attention back to the table. The stack of mail sat there, untouched since before the funeral. Envelopes of all sizes, most of them official-looking, their corners sharp, their edges too clean against the worn wood of the table. She had set them aside days ago, telling herself she would deal with them later. Later had come. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the top envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the paper itself carried weight. Her name was printed neatly across the front. Evelyn Carter. The return address belonged to First Western Bank. She frowned. Jack handled the finances. He always had. It had been one of those quiet agreements between them, never spoken out loud, but understood all the same. He took care of the numbers, the loans, the accounts. She took care of the house, the garden, the chickens, the things that made life feel lived in. It had worked for 42 years. She slid her finger under the edge of the envelope and opened it. The paper inside crackled as she unfolded it. Her eyes moved across the lines slowly, trying to make sense of what she was reading. Then she stopped and read it again. Her brow furrowed. That didn't look right. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the letter down and reached for the next envelope. This one was from a medical billing office. She opened it faster, her breathing beginning to shallow. Another number, another balance, another due date already passed. "No," she whispered under her breath. She grabbed a third envelope, then a fourth. Each one told the same story, but louder. Overdue. Final notice. Immediate action required. Her heart began to pound, not fast, but heavy, like each beat carried a weight of its own. She spread the letters out across the table, her eyes darting from one to the next, trying to piece them together like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Mortgage arrears. 6 months behind. Equipment loan, past due. Property taxes, unpaid. Hospital charges, remaining balance. The numbers stacked on top of each other until they blurred. Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest. This can't be right, she said aloud, though there was no one there to answer her. Jack wouldn't have let this happen. Jack planned everything. He was the kind of man who checked the weather 3 days in advance, who stocked supplies before a storm, who never ran out of fuel, who always knew where every tool was. He had been a Navy SEAL, for God's sake. He had lived his life by preparation, by control, by knowing what came next. He wouldn't leave her like this. Would he? Her eyes dropped back to the first letter. Foreclosure notice. The words seemed to grow larger the longer she stared at them. She felt something shift inside her, not just grief, not just sadness, but something colder. Fear. Real fear. The kind that didn't come from loneliness, but from the ground beneath you suddenly feeling unstable. How much? She whispered, her voice barely audible. She began adding the numbers, her finger tracing each line. 10,000, 20, 50, 80, 100. Her breath caught. It kept going. 150, 170, $180,000. Evelyn leaned back in her chair as if the number had physically pushed her. No, she said again, louder this time. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. Not yet. They just sat there, blurring the edges of everything. This isn't... Jack wouldn't... she tried to say, but the words wouldn't come together. Across the room, Titan finally lifted his head. He looked at her, his ears pricked forward, his amber eyes sharp and alert. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Evelyn saw something in his expression she hadn't noticed before. Not confusion, not grief. Focus. As if he understood that something had changed. As if he had been waiting for this moment. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows. The house creaked. And in the middle of that wide, empty Wyoming valley, with the mountains standing silent in the distance, Evelyn Carter realized something far worse than losing her husband. She wasn't just alone. She was standing on the edge of losing everything. Her home, her land, the life they had built together. All of it was slipping through her fingers, and she had no idea how to stop it. Her hand tightened around the foreclosure notice. The paper crumpled slightly under her grip. This can't be how it ends, she whispered, though she didn't yet believe it. Titan stood slowly, his large frame unfolding with quiet strength. He didn't come to her. He didn't nudge her hand or rest his head against her knee like he used to. Instead, he turned his head toward the back of the house, toward the window that looked out over the fields, toward something Evelyn hadn't noticed yet. His body stiffened, his ears locked forward, and for the first time since Jack's death, Titan let out a low, almost inaudible whine. Evelyn followed his gaze, but from where she sat, she could only see the open land stretching into the distance, pale under the winter sky. She didn't understand. Not yet. All she knew was that the worst day of her life hadn't been the funeral. It was this moment. Sitting at a quiet kitchen table, surrounded by paper. Realizing the man she trusted most in the world might have left her with nothing but ruin. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and the fear, a question began to form. one she wasn't ready to ask, but one that would not go away. What had Jack been hiding? And why did Titan look like he already knew the answer? The question settled into Evelyn's chest like cold stones. She didn't move for a long time. The letters remained spread across the table, each one a piece of a life she thought she understood. The wind outside pressed harder now, rattling the windows, slipping through the cracks in the old farmhouse like a warning she couldn't ignore. Evelyn finally pushed herself up from the chair. Her legs felt unsteady, as if the ground itself had shifted beneath her. She walked slowly to the sink and gripped the edge of the counter, staring out at the wide stretch of land beyond the glass. The Carter farm, 120 acres of mountain soil, pasture, and timber. It had never been easy land. The winters were long, the summers short, and every year demanded more than it gave. But it had been theirs. Jack used to stand right where she was, coffee in hand, watching the sun come up over the ridge. He would say nothing, just stand there, taking it in like a man measuring something only he could see. He always seemed so certain, so steady. Evelyn swallowed hard. "How could you let this happen?" she whispered, her reflection faint in the glass. Behind her, Titan shifted again. This time, he didn't lie back down. He stood, fully alert now, his body angled toward the back of the house. His gaze moved from the window to Evelyn, then back again, as if trying to pull her attention somewhere she wasn't looking. "Not now, Titan," Evelyn said softly, though there was no real conviction in her voice. She turned back to the table. The numbers were still there. Still real. She picked up one of the statements again, her hands steadier now, her mind trying to force itself into something practical. Mortgage. $87,000 remaining. 6 months overdue. Medical bills. $52,000. Equipment loans. $23,000. Property taxes. $18,000. She did the math again, slower this time, as if the answer might change if she gave it more care. It didn't. Over $180,000. And at the bottom of the foreclosure notice, printed in cold, unfeeling type, 30 days. 30 days to pay what was overdue, or the bank would take everything. Evelyn let out a slow breath that trembled on the way out. 30 days, she murmured. She had less than $900 in her checking account. Her Social Security check wouldn't come for another 2 weeks. There was no hidden savings, no emergency fund she didn't know about. Jack had always handled things, but he had never been careless, never reckless. This didn't make sense. It couldn't. A sudden knock at the front door broke the silence. Evelyn flinched. Titan's head snapped toward the sound, his ears sharp, his posture instantly tense. The knock came again, louder this time. "Mom, open up!" Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Mark. She hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. Another voice followed, sharper, more controlled. "Evelyn, we know you're in there." Susan. Evelyn straightened her shoulders, wiped her hands on her sweater, and walked to the door. Titan moved ahead of her, positioning himself just slightly to the side of the entryway, his body between Evelyn and whatever stood outside. She noticed that. She noticed everything now. Evelyn opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of snow and pine. Mark stood on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that looked too clean for this place. Susan stood beside him, her posture straight, her expression already set. They both stepped inside without waiting to be invited. "We've been calling you," Susan said, brushing past Evelyn. "You haven't answered." "I needed time," Evelyn replied quietly, closing the door behind them. Mark's eyes moved immediately to the kitchen table, to the letters. "Well," he said, his tone shifting. "Looks like you finally opened them." Evelyn stiffened. "You knew about this?" she asked. Susan exchanged a quick glance with Mark. "Yes," she said. "We did." The word landed harder than Evelyn expected. "You knew," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "And you didn't tell me?" "Dad called us months ago," Mark said, stepping closer to the table. "Said things were getting bad. He asked for help." Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. "And you said no?" Mark hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "We told him to sell," he said. "That was the only logical option." "Sell?" Evelyn echoed. "Sell this farm?" "Mom," Susan said, her tone firm but measured. "This place hasn't been profitable in years. Small farms like this don't survive anymore. Dad knew that. He just wouldn't admit it." "He was stubborn," Mark added. "Said he could fix it. Said he had a plan." Evelyn's hands curled into fists at her sides. "He always had a plan," she said. "Yeah," Mark replied. "Well, this was his plan." He gestured to the papers. The room went quiet. For a moment, the only sound was the wind outside, pressing against the walls like it was trying to get in. Evelyn looked from the letters to her children. "These are his debts," she said slowly. "His responsibility. And now you're standing here telling me the solution is to sell everything?" "It's not just a solution," Susan said. "It's the only option." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "We've already spoken to someone," she continued. "A developer out of Bozeman. They're interested in the land. They'll pay enough to cover the debts and leave you with something." "Something," Evelyn repeated. "About 50,000 after everything's settled," Mark said. "You could move into town. There's a senior community." "I'm not going anywhere," Evelyn cut in. Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Mark frowned. "Mom, be realistic." "I am being realistic," she said, meeting his eyes. "This is my home." "You can't manage this place alone," Susan said. "You couldn't manage it with Dad." That one stung. Evelyn took a step back as if the words had physically pushed her. "I've lived here for 42 years, she said. "I raised you here. I kept this place running while your father—" "While he what?" Mark interrupted. "While he ran us into the ground?" Titan growled. It was low, controlled, but unmistakable. All three of them turned to look at him. The dog stood between Evelyn and the table now, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on Mark. "Easy, boy," Mark muttered, though he took a small step back. Evelyn placed a hand on Titan's back. "It's okay," she said softly. But it wasn't. Nothing about this was okay. Her children stood in her kitchen, talking about her life like it was a problem to be solved, like it was already over. Evelyn looked at the papers again, then at the land beyond the window, then at Titan. The dog's gaze shifted once more, past all of them, toward the back of the property, toward something unseen from where they stood. A strange feeling crept into Evelyn's chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Something else. Something unresolved. As if this story wasn't complete. As if the numbers on the table were only part of the truth. "You don't understand," she said quietly. Mark frowned. "What don't we understand?" Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But this doesn't feel like your father." Susan sighed, clearly losing patience. "Mom, feelings don't matter right now. Facts do. You have 30 days before the bank takes everything." 30 days. The number echoed in Evelyn's mind. 30 days to save a lifetime. Titan let out another soft whine. Evelyn looked at him again. Really looked this time. The way he stood. The way he watched. The way he kept glancing toward the same direction. Toward the back of the property. Toward something he hadn't stopped thinking about since the moment she opened those letters. Evelyn's heart began to beat a little faster. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Titan didn't answer, but he didn't need to. For the first time since the papers hit the table, Evelyn felt something shift. A crack in the fear. A question rising through the confusion. What if this wasn't the whole story? And what if the only one who knew the rest wasn't human? The thought didn't make sense, and yet it wouldn't leave her. Evelyn stood in the middle of the kitchen, her children's voices fading into the background as something deeper pulled at her attention. Titan hadn't moved. His body remained fixed, his gaze unwavering, locked on the same invisible point beyond the house. "Mom, are you even listening?" Susan's voice cut in, sharp with frustration. Evelyn blinked, as if surfacing from underwater. "I hear you," she said quietly. But she wasn't listening anymore. Not to them. Mark let out a breath and rubbed his face. "Look, we're trying to help you. You don't have time to sit here and hope for some miracle." Miracle. The word echoed strangely in Evelyn's mind, because Titan suddenly turned and walked toward the back door. Not casually, not aimlessly, with purpose. He stopped at the door and looked back at her. Then he whined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. It was controlled, almost restrained, but it carried urgency. "Titan," Evelyn said softly. The dog pawed once at the door, then again. "Seriously?" Mark muttered. "Now the dog wants a walk?" But Evelyn felt something shift again, that same quiet pull. "No," she said, almost to herself. "That's not what this is." She walked toward the door. Titan stepped back just enough to give her space, but his body remained tense, ready. Evelyn opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharper now, biting at her skin. Titan moved immediately. He didn't run wild across the yard or veer toward the trees like he used to. He went straight ahead, past the fence, across the snow-dusted ground, toward the far edge of the property. Evelyn stepped outside, her boots crunching against the frozen earth. "Mom, where are you going?" Susan called from inside. Evelyn didn't answer. She pulled her coat tighter around her and followed. Behind her, she heard Mark curse under his breath before the sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the quiet. They were following too, but Evelyn's focus was already ahead. The land stretched wide and pale under the gray sky. The mountains stood silent in the distance, their peaks hidden behind low clouds. The wind cut across the open field, tugging at her coat, whispering through the dry grass. And there, at the far end of the property, the barn. It stood where it always had. Dark, still, unmoving. The wood was weathered nearly black with age, the roof sagging slightly under years of snow and sun. It was larger than most barns around here, built solid decades ago, long before Evelyn had ever stepped foot on this land. Jack's barn, the one place he had never let anyone enter. Evelyn slowed as she approached. Her breath came out in small clouds, her heart beating harder now for reasons she couldn't fully explain. Titan reached the barn first. He stopped directly in front of the large wooden doors. Then he sat and waited. Evelyn stopped a few feet behind him. The barn looked exactly as it always had. Closed, locked, forgotten. Except now it didn't feel forgotten at all. It felt hidden. "Mom!" Mark's voice came from behind her, slightly out of breath. "What are we doing out here?" Evelyn didn't turn. "He's bringing us here," she said. Susan stepped up beside her, arms crossed tightly against the cold. "It's a barn, Mom. It's always been here." "Not like this," Evelyn replied. Titan stood again. He moved closer to the doors and lifted one paw. Then he scratched. The sound echoed across the empty land. Wood against claw. Once. Twice. Then again. Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "He's trying to get in," she said. Mark frowned. "So? It's locked. Dad always kept it locked. Probably just tools in there." "No," Evelyn said. The word came out stronger than she expected. "No, Jack didn't just lock this place up for tools." She stepped closer. The old padlock hung from the metal latch, rusted but intact. It had been there for as long as she could remember. 30 years. 30 years, hours of silence behind those doors. "Mom," Susan said, her tone shifting, "don't tell me you're actually thinking about opening that." Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the lock, on the door, on everything she had never questioned before. Jack had never explained it. He had simply said, "That barn's mine, Ev. Some things are better left alone." And she had trusted him. She had never asked, never pushed, never wondered why. Until now. Titan scratched again. More insistent this time. Then he turned his head and looked at her. Not like a dog asking for something simple, but like something deeper. Like he was waiting for her to understand. Evelyn took another step forward. Her boots crunched softly in the snow. "Jack," she whispered under her breath. Her chest tightened. Breaking this lock felt wrong. It felt like stepping across a line she had respected for decades, like breaking a promise. But something inside her pushed back, a quieter voice, one that had been growing stronger since she opened those letters. "You're already losing everything. What else is there to protect?" The wind swept harder across the field, rattling the barn doors slightly on their hinges. Titan let out a low, urgent whine. Evelyn reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the lock. It was heavier than it looked, solid, unyielding, like the man who had put it there. "Mom, don't do this," Mark said behind her. "If Dad wanted you in there, he would have shown you." Evelyn closed her eyes. For a moment, she could almost hear Jack's voice. Calm, measured, certain. But then she remembered the letters, the debt, the silence, and the way Titan had brought her here. Not randomly, not by accident, but with purpose. Her eyes opened. "I think," she said slowly, "he is showing me now." Susan shook her head. "That doesn't make any sense." "No," Evelyn replied. "None of this makes sense." She looked down at Titan. The dog stood ready, his body steady, his eyes locked on her. Waiting, trusting, as if this moment mattered, as if this was something Jack had prepared him for. Evelyn felt her heart pound in her chest. Fear, doubt, grief, and something else. Something close to resolve. Her hand tightened around the cold metal of the lock. "This barn," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "is the only thing I haven't looked at yet. The only place Jack never let her in. The only place Titan keeps pointing to. The only place that might still hold answers." She swallowed hard. "If there's anything left of the truth," she said quietly, "it's behind this door." The wind died down for a moment. The world went still. And in that silence, with her children watching, with Titan standing beside her like a silent soldier, Evelyn Carter realized she was standing at the edge of something she could never take back. Once that lock broke, whatever was inside would change everything. She wrapped her fingers around it, and for the first time in 42 years, she seriously considered breaking Jack Carter's one unbreakable rule. Evelyn's hand hovered over the rusted lock, her fingers trembling slightly in the cold. The metal felt frozen, as if it had been waiting for this moment as long as she had avoided it. Behind her, Mark shifted his weight impatiently. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're letting a dog convince you to break into a building that probably has nothing but junk inside." Susan crossed her arms tighter against the wind. "Mom, think about this. If Dad kept it locked, there was a reason." Evelyn didn't turn. "I know there was a reason," she said quietly. Her voice was steady now. "That's exactly why I need to see it." The wind swept across the field again, tugging at her coat, carrying with it the faint smell of snow. Titan stepped closer. He didn't bark. He didn't pace. He simply stood beside her, solid and calm, his presence grounding in a way nothing else had been since Jack's death. Evelyn glanced down at him. His eyes met hers. There was no fear there, no hesitation, only certainty. The same certainty she used to see in Jack. That thought hit her harder than anything. Jack had trusted this dog with his life, and Titan had brought her here. Not once, not by accident, but with purpose. Evelyn inhaled slowly, the cold air burning her lungs. "All right," she whispered. Her hand tightened around the lock. It didn't move. Of course it didn't. 30 years of weather had sealed it in place. Evelyn stepped back. "I need something," she said. Mark scoffed. "You're actually going to do this?" Evelyn looked at him then, her expression sharper than it had been all day. "Yes," she said simply. Something in her tone made him stop talking. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the barn looming behind them like a shadow of the past. Evelyn turned and walked quickly back toward the house. Titan followed immediately, staying close to her side. Mark and Susan lingered for a second before trailing behind, their confusion growing with each step. Inside the garage, Evelyn moved with more urgency than she had felt since before the funeral. She scanned the walls until she found what she needed. A hammer. Heavy. Solid. She picked it up, the weight settling into her hand like something familiar. Jack had used this. Built things with it. Fixed things. Protected things. Evelyn swallowed. "Forgive me," she whispered under her breath. She wasn't sure if she was asking Jack, or herself, or whatever truth waited behind that door. Then she turned and walked back out. The cold hit her harder this time, but she barely noticed. Her focus was fixed. The barn, the lock, the end of not knowing. Titan reached it first again. He stood directly in front of the doors, his body still, his attention locked. Evelyn stepped up beside him. She raised the hammer. For a moment, she hesitated. Her mind flooded with memories. Jack standing in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. Jack shaking his head gently when she once asked what he kept in there. "Just old things, Ev. Nothing worth worrying about." Jack's quiet smile. Jack's steady eyes. And now, the letters, the debt, the silence he left behind. Evelyn's grip tightened. "If you were protecting me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind, "then I need to understand from what." She brought the hammer down. The sound echoed across the open land, metal against metal. The lock didn't break, but it shifted. A small movement. Enough. Evelyn lifted the hammer again. This time, she didn't hesitate. The second strike hit harder. The rust cracked. A sharp, brittle sound. Mark took a step forward. "Mom!" The third strike came down with all the weight of everything she was feeling. Grief, fear, anger, and the desperate need for answers. The lock snapped. It fell to the ground with a dull, final thud. Silence followed. The kind of silence that comes after something irreversible. Evelyn lowered the hammer slowly, her chest rising and falling. Her ears rang slightly from the impact. Behind her, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause. Titan stepped forward. He nudged the door lightly with his nose. The old wood groaned. Evelyn reached out and placed her hand on the door. The surface was rough beneath her palm, worn by decades of weather. "This is it," she said softly. Not to Mark, not to Susan, to herself, to Jack, to whatever waited inside. She pushed. The hinges resisted at first, stiff from years of disuse. Then they gave. Slowly, reluctantly. The doors creaked open. A thin beam of gray daylight cut into the darkness within, slicing through the dust-filled air. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't see anything, just shadows, shapes, the faint outline of something deeper. Titan didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. Calm, certain, like a soldier returning to a post he had never abandoned. Evelyn felt her heart race. This wasn't how a dog reacted to something unfamiliar. This was how a dog moved through something he knew. That realization sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Mom," Susan whispered behind her. Evelyn didn't respond. She took one step forward, then another, crossing the threshold. The air inside was different, still, dry, untouched. It smelled faintly of wood, oil, and something older, something preserved. The light followed her in, stretching across the floor, revealing just enough to make her breath catch. This wasn't a storage space. This wasn't a forgotten barn. Even in the dimness, Evelyn could see it. Order, structure, purpose. Shapes covered in cloth, arranged carefully along the walls. Workbenches, shelving, everything placed with intention. Her pulse quickened. "Jack," she whispered. Behind her, Mark and Susan stepped in as well, their movements slower now, more cautious. "What is all this?" Mark said under his breath. No one answered, because no one understood it yet. Titan moved deeper into the barn. He didn't wander. He followed a path, as if he had walked it before. Many times. Evelyn followed him, her boots echoing softly against the wooden floor. With each step, the light revealed more shapes, more covered objects, more signs that this place had not been abandoned. It had been maintained, hidden, preserved. Evelyn's heart pounded. Whatever she had expected. This wasn't it, not even close. And deep in her chest, the fear she had felt before began to shift, changing into something else, something bigger, something that told her breaking that lock was only the beginning. The air inside the barn felt untouched by time. Evelyn stepped further in, her boots echoing softly against the wooden floor. Dust drifted lazily through the narrow beam of daylight behind her. But beyond that, the space wasn't abandoned the way she had expected. It was preserved, organized, alive in a quiet, deliberate way. Titan moved ahead with calm certainty, his body low and focused, weaving through the dim space as if he had walked this path 100 times before. Evelyn followed, her eyes slowly adjusting. Shapes emerged from the darkness. Long rows of objects covered in heavy cloth. Workbenches lined with tools. Shelves stacked with labeled boxes. Everything was placed with precision, too precise to be random. "This," Mark said behind her, his voice hushed now, stripped of its earlier confidence. "What is this?" Evelyn didn't answer. She stepped toward the nearest covered object. Her hand reached out, hesitated for just a second, then pulled the cloth away. The fabric slipped down with a soft whisper. Beneath it, a table. But not just any table. The wood gleamed even in the low light, its surface smooth and rich with deep grain patterns that seemed to ripple under her fingertips. The edges were intricately carved, the legs shaped with a kind of craftsmanship she hadn't seen in years. It was beautiful, too beautiful to belong hidden away in a locked barn. Evelyn ran her hand along the surface, her breath catching. This is restored," she murmured. Susan stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she examined it. "That's not cheap wood," she said. That's high-end." Mark moved to another shape and yanked the cover off more quickly. A chair, matching the table, restored to the same level of care. "Okay," he said, his voice shifting. "That's weird." Evelyn moved deeper. Another cloth. Another reveal. A cabinet. Polished, detailed, flawless. Then another. A chandelier. Its crystal pieces catching the faint light and scattering it across the dark wood walls like broken stars. More pieces emerged as she walked. A writing desk. An antique clock. Shelves filled with smaller items. Silverware sets. Decorative pieces. Old lamps. Each one carefully cleaned, repaired, preserved. Evelyn's heart began to race. "This isn't storage," she said softly. "No," Susan agreed, her voice quieter now, more cautious. "This is a collection." But even that word didn't feel right, because collections weren't usually hidden. Collections weren't kept behind locked doors for decades. Evelyn's eyes moved to the far end of the barn. There, beneath a narrow window, stood a large workbench, and everything about it felt different, important. Titan had already reached it. He stood beside the bench, his body still, his attention fixed, waiting. Evelyn walked toward him, her steps slower now, her breathing shallow. The workbench was covered with tools, not scattered, not messy. Organized with military precision, small brushes, fine carving instruments, polishing cloths, bottles labeled in neat handwriting, wood stains, sealants. Everything had its place. Everything looked used, but maintained. Beside the tools were stacks of notebooks. Evelyn reached for one. Her fingers brushed the cover before she picked it up. It was worn, but not neglected. She opened it. Inside, pages of handwriting. Jack's handwriting. Clear, structured, precise. She flipped through the pages. Dates, measurements, notes. Restoration process, oak table, late 1800s. Damage, water warping, cracked joints. Solution, rehydrate, clamp, refinish. Evelyn's breath caught. He had written everything down, every step, every detail. This wasn't random. This was methodical. Years of it. "Mom," Mark said slowly, stepping closer. "Look at this." He held up a photograph. Evelyn turned. It showed a broken chair, splintered, worn, almost worthless. Then another photo. The same chair, restored, beautiful. Evelyn looked back at the pieces around her. The same transformation. over and over. Before, after, before, after. Her chest tightened. "He did all of this," she whispered. "No way," Mark said. That's years of work." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "Not years," she said. "Decades." The realization settled heavily in the room. Jack hadn't just been hiding something. He had been building something. Quietly, relentlessly, right under her nose. Susan stepped back, her expression shifting again, this time sharper. "Do you realize what this means?" she said. Evelyn looked at her. "These pieces, they're valuable," Susan continued. "Very valuable. Antique restoration like this, people pay serious money for it." Mark's eyes moved across the barn again, but now there was something different in his gaze. Calculation. "If even half of this is legit," he said, "this could be worth—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Evelyn felt it. The shift. The same shift she had seen earlier in the kitchen. But now it was stronger. Colder. Her children weren't seeing Jack anymore. They were seeing numbers. And something inside her hardened. "This isn't about money," she said quietly. Susan looked at her. "Of course it is. That's exactly what this is." "No," Evelyn replied, her voice steady. "That's what you see." She turned back to the workbench, to the notebooks, to the careful arrangement of tools, to the life Jack had lived in secret. And for the first time since opening those letters, she didn't feel betrayed. She felt something else. Confusion, yes, but beneath it, a growing sense of awe. Why would he do this? Why hide it? Why never tell her? Titan shifted beside her. He nudged the edge of the workbench gently. Evelyn followed the movement. There, half hidden beneath a folded cloth, was something she hadn't noticed before. An envelope. Her name written across the front. Evelyn Carter. Her breath caught. The room seemed to shrink around her. Mark stepped forward. "What's that?" Evelyn reached for it slowly. Her fingers brushed the paper. And in that moment, everything else faded. The barn, the furniture, the voices behind her, all of it. Because somehow, she already knew. This was the answer. Not the numbers, not the debts. This. Her hand closed around the envelope, and as she lifted it from the workbench, her heart began to pound harder than it had all day. Whatever Jack had been hiding, whatever this place really was, the truth was no longer behind a locked door. It was in her hands. Evelyn stared at the envelope. Her name was written in Jack's handwriting. Steady, familiar, unmistakable. For a moment, she couldn't move. The barn seemed to close in around her, the silence pressing against her ears, broken only by the faint creak of wood and the soft shifting of Titan's paws beside her. "Open it," Mark said, his voice low but edged with impatience. Evelyn didn't respond. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. 30 years. 30 years of secrets, of silence, of trust. And now, whatever it all meant, was here. But something held her back. Not fear, not exactly. Something deeper. Like the weight of knowing that once she read it, nothing would ever be the same again. Titan moved closer. He didn't push. He didn't bark. He simply pressed his body gently against her leg, grounding her, steadying her. Evelyn let out a slow breath. "All right," she whispered. She slid her finger under the edge of the envelope. But before she could open it, Titan suddenly stiffened. His ears snapped forward. His body shifted instantly from calm to alert. A low growl rolled from his chest. Evelyn froze. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Titan stepped in front of her, not aggressively, but deliberately. His eyes locked on Mark and Susan. Mark frowned. "What's his problem now?" Titan didn't move. He stood between them, between Evelyn and the envelope. Evelyn felt it then, clear, sharp. This wasn't random. This was intentional. "He doesn't want you near this," she said. Susan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding, right? It's a letter, Mom, not classified military intel." Evelyn's eyes didn't leave Titan. "No," she said softly, "but to Jack, it might as well have been." Mark took a step forward. "Look, whatever's in that envelope affects all of us. This is Dad's estate. We have a right to—" Titan growled, louder this time. Not out of control, not wild, controlled, a warning. Mark stopped. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty flickered across his face. "That dog needs to be put outside," he muttered. Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No," she said. Her voice was quiet, but final. "He stays." Susan crossed her arms. "Mom, you're letting a dog dictate what happens here." Evelyn turned to face her. "I'm listening to the only one in this room who isn't trying to take something from me." The words landed harder than she expected. Susan's expression tightened. "That's not fair." "No," Evelyn replied. "What's not fair is standing in my house, on my land, talking about selling everything before I even understand what your father left behind." Mark exhaled sharply. "We're trying to help you." "Then help me by stepping back," Evelyn said. Silence filled the barn. The tension hung thick in the air. Titan remained still, watching, waiting. Evelyn looked down at the envelope again, then at the workbench. Something caught her eye. A small object, partially hidden beneath a folded cloth near where the envelope had been resting. She reached for it. Titan didn't stop her. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. She lifted it into the light. A key. Small. Solid. Attached to a worn piece of leather. Evelyn turned it over. Her breath caught. Stitched into the leather, faded but unmistakable, was Jack's old seal insignia, the same one he had kept in his drawer for years, the one he never threw away. Evelyn's chest tightened. "He left this here," she whispered. "For you?" Susan asked. Evelyn shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "For this." She looked at the envelope again, then at Titan. The dog's posture shifted slightly, not tense anymore, focused, as if he had been waiting for her to find both pieces, the letter and the key, together. "What does it open?" Mark asked. Evelyn scanned the workbench, then the barn. Then something clicked, not logically, instinctively. "This isn't everything," she said. Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" Evelyn gestured around them. "This place, it's organized, structured, like a system." She looked back at the key, at something hidden. Titan turned his head, following her thought. Then he moved. He walked past the workbench, deeper into the barn, to the far wall, and stopped. Evelyn followed. Her steps slower now, more cautious, more aware. The wall looked ordinary at first. Wood, aged, solid. But then she saw it. A seam, subtle, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Her heart began to pound. "This," she whispered. Mark stepped up beside her. "Is that a door?" Evelyn finished. "Hidden, built into the wall itself." 30 years, and she had never known. Evelyn lifted the key. Her hand trembled slightly. Behind her, Susan's voice came quieter now. "What if we shouldn't?" Evelyn didn't answer. She looked at Titan. The dog stood still, watching her. Not pushing, not stopping. Just trusting. The same way Jack always had. Evelyn swallowed. "If there's more," she said softly, "then this is where he kept it." Her hand moved toward the lock. The key slid in. It fit. Perfectly. For a moment, everything went silent again. The kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Evelyn turned the key. The mechanism clicked. Soft. Final. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, she pushed. The hidden door creaked open. Darkness waited on the other side, deeper than the barn. Colder. Heavier. Evelyn stepped back slightly, her pulse racing. Whatever was inside this second space wasn't meant for everyone. Titan moved first. He stepped through the doorway without hesitation, then turned back, waiting for her. Evelyn looked at her children, then at the open space, then at the envelope still in her hand. The answers were no longer scattered. They were concentrated, focused. Right here. "I'm going in," she said. And for the first time since all of this began, it didn't feel like she was chasing the truth. It felt like the truth was finally ready to be revealed. Evelyn stepped forward. The air beyond the hidden door was colder, heavier, as if it had been sealed away from the rest of the world. The light from the barn barely reached inside, stretching thin across the floor before dissolving into shadow. Titan moved ahead of her, his paws silent against the ground. He didn't hesitate. That alone told her everything. Evelyn crossed the threshold. Behind her, she heard Mark and Susan shift uneasily, but neither followed immediately. The space felt different, more private, more deliberate, like a place meant for one person, for her. The room was smaller than the barn, but more focused. No rows of furniture, no scattered pieces. Instead, everything inside was contained. A reinforced table, a steel cabinet, several tightly sealed crates stacked against the wall, and on the far side, a single chair, positioned directly under a hanging light. The bulb flickered faintly as Evelyn stepped closer, as if responding to her presence after years of silence. Her breath caught. This wasn't storage. This was a command center. Everything about it was stripped down, purposeful, precise, military. Jack. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the envelope. Now she understood. The barn had been the work. This room, this was the plan. Titan stopped beside the chair and sat, still, watching her, waiting. Evelyn stepped closer to the table. Her heart was pounding now, harder than it had all day. The envelope felt heavier than before. She turned it over once, then again. Her name stared back at her. Evelyn Carter. Written by the man she had trusted more than anyone. The man she had just begun to doubt. Her hands trembled. "Jack," she whispered. Behind her, Susan's voice came softer now. Mom, what if this isn't what you think? Evelyn didn't turn. I don't know what I think anymore, she said. But I know this is where he wanted me to be. Silence followed. Evelyn slid her finger under the edge of the envelope. This time, she didn't stop. The paper tore open with a quiet, final sound. She pulled the letter out slowly. The pages unfolded in her hands. Familiar handwriting. Steady, calm. Jack. Her vision blurred for a moment. Then she began to read. My Ev, if you're reading this, it means two things. First, I'm gone. Second, Titan did his job. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her eyes moved quickly over the words, her heart tightening with each line. I trained him for this. Not just to protect you, but to guide you. Because I knew, if anything happened to me before I could explain things, he'd be the only one you'd trust enough to follow. Evelyn glanced down at Titan. The dog didn't move, but his eyes stayed locked on her. Steady. Faithful. Exactly as Jack had described. She swallowed hard and continued reading. Ev, I'm sorry. I know what you're seeing right now doesn't make sense. The debts, the notices, the pressure. It looks like I failed you, like I let everything fall apart. But I need you to understand something. The farm was already failing, years ago. Evelyn's chest tightened. Her eyes moved faster now. I saw it coming long before anyone else did. The numbers didn't lie. Small operations like ours. They don't survive anymore. Not without becoming something else. And I couldn't turn this place into something it wasn't. Not without losing what it meant. So I made a choice. Evelyn's hands trembled. A tear slipped down her cheek. I decided I wouldn't fight a battle I couldn't win. I would build something else. Something you wouldn't see. Something that would be there when I wasn't. Her breath caught. She pressed her lips together, trying to steady herself. For 30 years, I've been buying what others throw away. Broken furniture, damaged pieces, things people don't see value in. I brought them here, and I fixed them, one by one. Slow, careful, patient, the way we were trained. Because sometimes, Ev, the best way to protect something is to build it quietly. Evelyn's vision blurred again. She wiped her eyes quickly, but the tears kept coming. You never asked about the barn, and I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want you to carry the weight of it. I thought I had time. Time to fix the farm. Time to make it all unnecessary. But when I got sick, I realized time was the one thing I didn't have. Evelyn's breath broke. Her shoulders trembled. Everything in that barn, it's yours, not ours. Yours. I made sure of that. There's a trust, protected, locked down tighter than anything I ever worked on in the field. No one touches it but you. Not the bank. Not anyone. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. The pressure in her chest shifted. The anger she had felt. The doubt. It cracked. And something else began to take its place. Something deeper. Stronger. Love. You won't need to sell everything. Just enough. Enough to clear what's coming. Enough to give you time. After that, you decide what this place becomes. Not me. Not anyone else. You. Her grip tightened on the letter. You were never the one who needed saving, Ev. You were the one I was building this for. Because I knew, if I gave you the tools, You'd build something better than I ever could." Evelyn's tears fell freely now. She didn't try to stop them. "Titan will stay with you. He knows his job. He'll watch. He'll warn. He'll stand between you and anyone who doesn't belong. Just like he always did for me. Just like I wish I could." Her voice broke as she read the final lines. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. But I need you to know one thing. I didn't leave you with nothing. I spent 30 years making sure of that. I love you. Always. Jack." The letter slipped slightly in her hands. Evelyn stood there, shaking. The room blurred around her. The barn. The debt. The fear. Everything she thought she knew shifted. Rewritten in an instant. Jack hadn't failed her. He hadn't abandoned her. He had been protecting her. All along. Silently. Patiently. Like a soldier preparing for a battle he knew he wouldn't be there to fight. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. A sob escaped her, raw and uncontrollable. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for doubting him, for not seeing, for thinking, even for a moment, that he had left her unprotected." Titan stood. He stepped closer and gently rested his head against her side. Evelyn placed a hand on his neck, gripping his fur. "You knew," she whispered through tears. "You knew the whole time." The dog didn't move. Didn't need to. Because now, she knew too, and everything had changed. Evelyn stood in the hidden room, the letter still pressed against her chest, her breathing uneven but steadying with each passing second. The fear that had gripped her since opening those bills was gone. Not completely, but enough. Replaced by something stronger. Clarity. Jack hadn't left her in ruin. He had left her a plan. And now, it was hers to follow. Evelyn wiped her eyes slowly and folded the letter with care, smoothing the edges as if it were something sacred. Because it was. She placed it inside her coat, close to her heart. Then she looked around the room again. This time, she saw it differently, not as a mystery, but as a system. The steel cabinet, the crates, the table. Everything had purpose. Everything had intention. "Mom," Susan's voice came softly from the doorway. Evelyn turned. Her children stood just outside the hidden room now. They looked different, quieter, less certain. What did it say?" Mark asked. Evelyn held his gaze for a moment. Then she stepped past them, back into the main barn. Titan followed immediately, always at her side. "He didn't leave us in debt," Evelyn said. Her voice was calm now, grounded. "He prepared for it." Mark frowned. "What does that mean?" Evelyn walked to the workbench and placed her hand on the notebooks. "It means everything in here," she said, gesturing to the barn. "Was never random." Susan shook her head slightly. "Mom, you're not making sense. There are still bills. The bank still—" "The bank doesn't have the whole picture," Evelyn interrupted. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it carried weight. Mark crossed his arms. "Then explain it." Evelyn looked at them. Really looked. For the first time since they had arrived, she didn't see pressure or expectation. She saw distance. They didn't understand this place. They didn't understand Jack. And they didn't understand her. "Your father knew the farm was failing," she said. Silence followed. Mark's expression shifted. "You're saying he gave up?" "No," Evelyn replied. "I'm saying he adapted. She picked up one of the notebooks and handed it to Mark. "Look." Mark hesitated, then took it. His eyes scanned the pages, the detailed notes, the dates, the process. His brow furrowed. "This is all him?" "All of it," Evelyn said. "For 30 years. Susan stepped closer, flipping through another notebook. "Restoration logs," she murmured. "Item values, estimated resale." Her voice trailed off. Understanding crept in, slow, reluctant. "This is inventory," she said. Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Mark looked up. "So what? You're saying he was flipping furniture?" Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said. "He was building something." She walked to the nearest covered piece and pulled the cloth away. The polished surface reflected the dim light. "Each one of these he brought back from nothing." She moved to another. "And each one has value." Susan's eyes widened slightly. "Real value." Evelyn met her gaze. "Yes." The barn fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, focused. Mark turned slowly, looking around the space with new eyes, not as a place, but as something calculated. "How much?" he asked. Evelyn didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, she didn't know yet. But she knew one thing: enough. "Enough," she said quietly, "to stop what's coming." Susan let out a breath. "Then we need to get someone in here," she said quickly. "An appraiser, a dealer. We can liquidate everything, pay off the debt, split what's left." "No." The word came fast, firm, final. Both of them turned to her. "What do you mean, no?" Mark asked. Evelyn stepped forward. Her posture straightened, her voice steady. "This isn't something we tear apart and sell off like it's a garage sale." "Mom, this is exactly what it is," Susan said. "Assets, valuable ones." Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said again. "This is your father's life's work, and it's my decision what happens to it." Mark's expression hardened. "We're his kids. That makes it our decision too." Evelyn held his gaze. "For the farm," she said slowly. "Maybe." She paused. "But not for this." Mark frowned. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn reached into her coat. She pulled out the letter, held it up. "He made sure of it." Susan's voice sharpened. "Made sure of what?" Evelyn met her eyes. "That this belongs to me." Silence. Mark laughed once, short and disbelieving. "That's not how that works." Evelyn didn't react. "It is," she said calmly, "and there's paperwork to prove it." Susan's jaw tightened. "Where?" Evelyn turned slightly, glancing toward the hidden room. "In there," she said. Mark followed her gaze. His expression changed again, less confident now, more uncertain. "This is insane," he muttered. "No," Evelyn replied. "This is your father thinking 10 steps ahead." Titan moved beside her, his body brushing lightly against her leg. Steady, present, a reminder. Evelyn rested her hand on his head. "He didn't just build this," she said quietly. "He protected it." She looked back at her children. "And he protected me." The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Susan looked down at the floor, her thoughts shifting visibly. Mark said nothing. For the first time since arriving. He had no argument. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the barn walls. But inside, everything felt different. The fear was gone. The confusion had been replaced by understanding. And in its place, something stronger had taken root. Control. Evelyn looked around the barn one more time. At the restored pieces. At the tools. At the system Jack had built in silence. Then she looked at Titan. The dog met her gaze. Still. Watchful. Loyal. Okay, she said softly. More to herself than anyone else. I understand now. And as she stood there, surrounded by the truth Jack had left behind, Evelyn Carter realized something else. This wasn't the end of his plan. It was the beginning of hers. The wind had shifted by the time they stepped out of the barn. Clouds rolled low over the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. The air felt heavier now, like something was coming. Evelyn stood on the edge of the open field, the barn behind her no longer a mystery, but a foundation. Titan stood beside her, still, alert, watching everything. Mark and Susan followed a few steps behind, quieter now, their earlier certainty replaced by something less stable. What are you going to do? Susan asked. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved across the land. The fences, the pasture, the house in the distance. Everything she thought she was about to lose just hours ago. Now, it wasn't slipping away anymore. It was something she could fight for. I'm going to protect it, she said finally. Mark let out a breath. With what? Hope? Evelyn turned to him. With what your father left me. Mark shook his head. That's not enough. You still have deadlines. The bank doesn't care about restored furniture and handwritten notebooks. No, Evelyn said, but they care about money. Susan stepped forward. Then we need to move fast. Get appraisers in here. Sell everything we can before. Not everything, Evelyn said. Her voice cut clean through the air. Susan stopped. What? Evelyn held her gaze. I'm not tearing his work apart just to panic sell it. Mark scoffed. So what? You're going to let the bank take the land instead? No, Evelyn said again. This time there was no hesitation. I'm going to sell what I need to. Only what I need. The words landed differently. Measured. Strategic. Mark narrowed his eyes. You think you can manage that on your own? Evelyn didn't flinch. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Then, the distant sound of an engine broke through the wind. All three of them turned. A truck, dark, heavy, coming up the long dirt road toward the house. Titan's posture changed instantly. His ears snapped forward. His body stiffened. A low growl began to build in his chest. Evelyn felt it before she understood it. Trouble. The truck slowed as it approached, tires crunching over gravel. It came to a stop near the house. Two men stepped out. One wore a long coat, his posture rigid, his movements precise. The other carried a folder. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Bank, Mark muttered. Evelyn didn't wait. She started walking. Fast. Titan moved with her immediately, staying tight at her side. By the time she reached the front of the house, the men were already approaching. Mrs. Carter? The man with the folder called out. Evelyn stopped a few feet away. Yes. He nodded, flipping open the folder. I'm here on behalf of First Western Bank. Of course he was. We've been trying to reach you regarding your overdue mortgage and property taxes, he continued. I received your notice, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, controlled. The man glanced at the house and then back at her. As stated, you have 30 days from the date of notice to resolve the outstanding balance. I'm aware, Evelyn replied. He paused, then adjusted his tone slightly. There's also been interest in your property, he added. A developer has submitted a preliminary offer. If you're willing to sell quickly, it could resolve your debt situation without further complications. Mark stepped forward slightly. See? That's what we've been saying. Evelyn lifted a hand, not aggressive, but enough to stop him. I'm not selling, she said. The man blinked. Ma'am, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Foreclosure proceedings will be stopped, Evelyn said. The confidence in her voice made him pause. By what means? He asked. Evelyn met his eyes. Payment. Silence. The wind swept across the yard again, carrying the weight of the moment with it. The man studied her, then nodded once. Well, he said, if you're able to clear the overdue amount within the required time frame, the foreclosure process can be suspended. He closed the folder. But I wouldn't delay. He turned to leave, then hesitated. One more thing, he added, glancing back. The developer's offer won't stay on the table forever. Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to. He nodded once more and walked back toward the truck. The engine started again, and within moments, they were gone. The sound faded into the distance. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was sharper, more defined, more real. Mark turned to her. You just told the bank you can pay them. Yes, Evelyn said, and you don't even know how much you can get for any of that stuff yet. I know enough, she replied. Susan stepped closer. Mom, this is serious. If you're wrong, Sue. I'm not, Evelyn said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Because now, she believed it. Not blindly, not desperately, but with the same quiet certainty Jack had lived with. Mark shook his head. You're gambling everything. Evelyn looked at him. No, she said. I'm following a plan. Titan shifted beside her, his presence steady, unshaken, as if he understood exactly what was happening and exactly what needed to happen next. Evelyn turned her gaze back toward the barn. The wind moved across the land again, but this time, it didn't feel like something was being taken from her. It felt like something was beginning. The fight had started, and for the first time, Evelyn Carter wasn't afraid of losing. She was ready to win. The next morning came cold and clear. Frost clung to the fence posts, and a pale light stretched across the valley as the sun rose behind the mountains. The farmhouse felt different now, not empty, not broken, but awake. Evelyn stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the land. For the first time since Jack's death, she wasn't waiting for something to fall apart. She was planning. Behind her, Titan lay near the door, but he wasn't watching it anymore. He was watching her, always watching her. Evelyn turned from the window and picked up the phone. Her hand hovered for just a moment. Then she dialed. It rang twice. A voice answered, older, steady. Foster. Evelyn swallowed. Wade. It's Evelyn Carter. There was a pause. Then, Evelyn, Wade Foster said, his tone shifting instantly. I heard about Jack. I'm sorry. Thank you, she said quietly. She hesitated, then took a breath. I need your help. Another pause. Short, measured. What kind of help? He asked. Evelyn glanced toward the barn. The kind Jack would have trusted you with. Silence followed. Then, I'll be there this afternoon. The line clicked. Evelyn lowered the phone slowly. Titan stood, No command, no signal. He simply knew. By midday, the truck arrived. Older than most on the road, dust-covered, but solid. Wade Foster stepped out. He looked like a man who hadn't changed much in years. Broad-shouldered, weathered, eyes that missed nothing. He didn't say much at first, just nodded once to Evelyn. Then his gaze shifted to Titan. The dog stood still, alert, focused. Wade's expression softened just slightly. "Still working," he said under his breath. Evelyn noticed. "You knew?" she asked. Wade nodded. "Jack told me he was training him for something long-term," he said. "Didn't say what." Evelyn gestured toward the barn. "He finished it," she said. Wade didn't ask questions. He simply walked. Evelyn and Titan followed. Inside the barn, Wade stopped. His eyes moved across the space, slowly, carefully, taking everything in, the furniture, the tools, the layout. Then, the workbench, the notebooks, the structure. Wade let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he said. "That's him." Evelyn watched him. "You understand this," she said. Wade nodded once. "He didn't just build this," he said. "He mapped it." He stepped closer to the notebooks, flipping through a few pages. Inventory logs, rotation schedules, value tracking. He looked up. "This is military." Evelyn felt a small, quiet sense of relief. "I thought so," she said. Wade gave a faint nod. "Jack never stopped thinking like a SEAL," he said. "He just changed the mission." Titan moved to stand beside him. Wade glanced down. "Good dog," he said softly. Titan didn't react, but he didn't move away either. Evelyn stepped forward. "I need to know what I can sell," she said. "Fast." Wade closed the notebook. "Not everything," he said immediately. "I know," Evelyn replied. "I'm not touching most of it." Wade studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good," he said. "Because if you dump all this at once, you lose value." He walked through the barn again, this time more focused, evaluating, selecting. "This," he said, pulling a cover from a polished table. "Mid-range, clean, good resale." He moved to another. "And this, same category." Then a third. "These can move quick without attracting too much attention." Evelyn followed closely, listening, absorbing everything. "How much?" she asked. Wade did the math in his head. "Enough to stop the bleeding," he said. "Not enough to give everything away." Evelyn nodded. That was all she needed. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the barn walls. But inside, the plan was forming. By late afternoon, they had selected a small group of pieces, carefully chosen, strategic, not emotional, not reckless. Evelyn stood back, looking at them. This wasn't loss. This was movement. Wade stepped beside her. "You're doing it right," he said. Evelyn looked at him. "I don't feel like I am," she admitted. Wade gave a small, almost knowing nod. "That's how you know you are," he said. Titan moved between them, then turned toward Evelyn. His posture had changed, not tense, not guarded, calmer, as if something had shifted inside him too. Evelyn rested her hand on his head. "We're okay," she whispered, and for the first time, it felt true. The next few days moved fast. Calls were made. An appraiser came. A buyer followed. The process was quiet, efficient, just like Jack would have done. Money began to move. Debts began to shrink. The number that had once crushed her was no longer unstoppable. One payment cleared the overdue mortgage. Another covered the immediate taxes. The pressure eased, not gone, but reduced, manageable. Evelyn sat at the same kitchen table where everything had begun, the same place she had felt the world collapse. Now, the papers in front of her looked different, marked, updated, paid. She let out a slow breath. Titan lay at her feet, relaxed, for the first time in days. No pacing, no watching the door, just still. Evelyn looked down at him. "You knew," she said softly. The dog didn't move, but his tail gave a small, quiet tap against the floor. Evelyn smiled faintly. Not a full smile, but enough. Because now she understood something else. This wasn't about saving everything. It was about saving what mattered. And thanks to Jack, thanks to Titan, she still had that chance. The mornings felt different now. Not easier, but clearer. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch just as the first light touched the tops of the mountains. The air was still cold, but it no longer carried the same weight it had days before. The fear was gone, replaced by something quieter. Purpose. Titan stood beside her, his posture relaxed but attentive as always. He no longer paced at night, no longer watched the door like he was waiting for someone who wouldn't return. Now, he watched her, because now, she was the one moving forward. Evelyn looked out across the land. The fences needed repair. The shed roof sagged slightly. The pasture had gone wild in places, but none of it looked like failure anymore. It looked like work. And for the first time, work didn't feel overwhelming. It felt possible. Behind her, the barn stood open, not hidden, not locked, alive. Evelyn stepped down from the porch. Titan followed. They walked together across the frost-covered ground, their breath visible in the early light. When they reached the barn, Evelyn paused for just a moment, then stepped inside. The space felt different now. The shadows weren't heavy anymore. The silence wasn't empty. It held something growing. Wade stood near the workbench, flipping through one of Jack's notebooks. "You're up early," he said without looking up. "So are you," Evelyn replied. Wade gave a small nod. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Been thinking." Evelyn walked further in, her eyes moving across the pieces they hadn't sold. Still intact. Still valuable. Still waiting. "For what?" she asked. Wade closed the notebook and looked at her. "For what this place is supposed to become." Evelyn felt that question settle into her chest, because she had been thinking the same thing. The debts were no longer closing in. The land was still hers. The barn was more than just a solution. It was something else, something unfinished. "I don't think he built this just to be sold off," Evelyn said slowly. Wade studied her. "No," he said. "He didn't." Evelyn walked to the workbench and ran her fingers lightly over the tools, each one placed exactly where Jack had left it, each one part of something bigger. "He documented everything," she said. "The process, the methods." Wade nodded. "Training," he said. Evelyn looked at him. "What?" "That's what this is," Wade explained. "Not just work, training." He gestured to the notebooks. He didn't just write down what he did. He wrote down how to do it again. Evelyn felt something shift inside her. A spark. Small, but real. You're saying, she began. Wade nodded slightly. He built a system that can be passed on. Silence filled the barn. But this silence felt different. Not uncertain. Full. Evelyn turned slowly, looking at the space again. The workbench, the tools, the pieces waiting to be restored. The structure Jack had left behind. And suddenly, she saw it. Not as a secret, not as a backup plan, but as something alive, something that could grow. We don't have to sell it, she said. Wade didn't respond immediately, because he understood. You're thinking bigger, he said. Evelyn nodded. Yes. Her voice steadied as she spoke. We keep it. We use it. We build something with it. Titan stepped forward, his presence anchoring her. Evelyn placed her hand on his back. This place, she continued. It can help people. Wade crossed his arms slightly, considering. How? He asked. Evelyn took a breath. People who need a second chance, she said. People who don't have direction. She paused. Veterans. That word hung in the air. Wade's expression changed. Not much, but enough. You've thought about this, he paused long. Evelyn nodded slowly. Jack did, she said. I'm just seeing it now. Wade looked around the barn again, then back at her. You'd need structure, he said. Support. People who know what they're doing. Evelyn smiled faintly. That's why you're here. Wade let out a quiet breath. A hint of something like respect passed through his expression. You don't waste time, he said. Evelyn shook her head. I don't have time to waste. The two of them stood there, the weight of the idea settling into something real, something possible. Outside, the sun rose higher, casting warm light through the barn doors. For the first time, the space felt open, not hidden, not protected, but ready. Later that afternoon, the first person arrived, a young man, early 20s, quiet, uncertain. Wade had called him. Former service, struggling to adjust, didn't know what came next. Evelyn met him at the door. He looked around the barn, unsure. What is this place? He asked. Evelyn glanced at Titan, then back at him. It's a place to rebuild things, she said. The young man nodded slowly. And me? He asked. Evelyn smiled gently. If you're willing, she said, you can rebuild too. Titan stepped forward. The young man hesitated, then reached out. The dog didn't pull away, didn't growl. He simply stood there. Steady, accepting. The moment passed quietly. But it mattered, because something had begun. Days turned into weeks. The barn filled with movement. Not chaos, not noise, purpose, hands learning, mistakes made, lessons repeated, wood shaped, pieces restored. And slowly, people changed. Evelyn stood at the edge of it all, watching, not leading like Jack would have, but guiding, supporting, building something new from what he left behind. Titan moved through the space like he belonged to every part of it. Watching, protecting. Sometimes simply sitting beside someone who needed silence more than words. The farm was no longer just surviving. It was growing. And for the first time since everything began. Evelyn didn't feel like she was holding on. She felt like she was moving forward. 2 years changed everything. The Carter farm no longer looked like a place on the edge of being lost. It looked alive. The fences stood repaired, straight lines cutting across the open land. The pasture had returned to a healthy green in the warmer months and held steady through the cold seasons. The house, once quiet and heavy with absence, carried sound again. Boots on wood floors, low conversations, the occasional laugh that lingered longer than expected. And the barn. The barn was no longer a secret. It had become something people spoke about beyond the valley, a place where broken things came back to life. Not just furniture, people. Evelyn stood just outside the wide open doors, watching the late afternoon light spill into the space. Inside, a small group worked quietly, hands steady, focused, learning. The rhythm was familiar now. Tools against wood, careful sanding, measured movement, purpose. Wade stood near the workbench, guiding a younger man through a repair. His voice was calm, patient, the way Jack's had always been. Some things carried forward without needing to be taught. Evelyn stepped inside slowly. Her presence didn't interrupt anything. It didn't need to. She wasn't the center of this place. She was its foundation. On the far wall above the original workbench hung a framed photograph of Jack. Simple, unadorned, the same quiet expression he had always worn. Beside it, a small plaque. Not large, not loud, just enough. Jack Carter. A life built in silence, a legacy built to last. Evelyn paused beneath it. For a moment, the sound of the barn faded. Not completely, but enough for her to feel it. That familiar presence. Not as grief, not anymore. As something steady, enduring. "We did it," she said quietly. Not out loud, but not silently either. Somewhere in between. As if he could still hear her. A soft movement at her side pulled her attention down. Titan. Older now. Slower. The gray in his fur more pronounced. His movements more deliberate. But his eyes, still sharp. Still watching. Still present. Evelyn knelt slowly beside him, her hand resting against his neck. "You stayed," she whispered. The dog leaned slightly into her touch. He didn't need commands anymore. Didn't need direction. His work had changed. From guiding to guarding what had been built. Behind them, the sound of a truck pulling up broke through the quiet. Evelyn stood. She already knew who it was. Mark stepped into the barn a moment later. He looked different. Not polished. Not distant. Grounded. There was hesitation in his posture, but not resistance. "Hey," he said. Evelyn nodded once. "Hey." He glanced around the barn, taking it in. Not with calculation this time. With understanding. "It's bigger than I thought," he admitted. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Mark stepped further inside. His eyes landed on the photograph of Jack. He paused there. Longer than necessary. "I was wrong," he said quietly. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled. Real. Evelyn looked at him. "I know," she said. There was no anger in her voice. No need for it anymore. Mark exhaled slowly. "I didn't see it," he continued. "Any of it. What he built. What you turned it into." Evelyn folded her arms lightly. "It wasn't meant to be seen," she said. Mark nodded. "Can I?" He hesitated, then continued. "Come by sometimes. Help out?" Evelyn studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "We'll see," she said. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't immediate acceptance either. It was something earned. Mark understood. He nodded once. "That's fair." He stepped back slightly, giving the space back to what it was, to what it had become. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the work in the barn began to wind down. Tools were set aside, hands wiped clean, conversations softened, people left. One by one, until only Evelyn and Titan remained. The light shifted, turning golden as it filtered through the open doors. Evelyn walked slowly through the barn, past the restored pieces, past the workbench, past the place where everything had begun. She stopped once more beneath Jack's photograph. Her eyes lingered there, not searching, not questioning, just present. "You didn't leave me with nothing," she said softly. "You gave me everything I needed." Titan lay down beside her, his breathing slow, steady, watching, always watching. Evelyn reached down and rested her hand against his side. The warmth beneath her palm grounded her, reminded her. She wasn't alone. She had never truly been. The wind outside moved gently across the land, no longer harsh, no longer warning, just present, like everything else. Evelyn turned toward the open doors. The farm stretched out before her, strong, enduring, alive, and behind her, the barn. No longer locked, no longer hidden. A place where silence had once protected something, and now, a place where that silence had given way to something greater, a legacy, not of loss, but of quiet strength, of patience, of love that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. Evelyn Carter stepped forward into the fading light, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't look back, because everything that mattered was already standing, right where it was meant to be. If you believe in standing your ground and protecting what's yours, type yes in the comments. Real strength isn't loud. It's built quietly, day by day, just like this. And if stories like this mean something to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more coming your way.